Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande.
If it comes down to details like that, we're just going to have to refigure it all anyways when we're at Mutual INT 29 in a couple of subjective weeks. Figure out what your plan would be. Figure out what you'd need to set your plan in motion, that takes time to gather, that we need to start now, and isn't doable far more efficiently at Mutual INT 29. Then we plausibly just do that. Set in motion time-sensitive subplans or resource gathering. I can decide later whether to actually do it, unless it's incredibly clear right now that the plan is one that smarter Carissa can't repair into something smarter me will go along with. I register a strong preference that this plan have me not destroy Agorian before Cheliax attacks Osirian once they believe they've got a hostage. I'm not especially likely to be happy about Cheliax conquering Osirian and putting its inhabitants, who helped me, to slavery and misery. I would do it to clean up the multiverse, I suppose, if there was no other way, but I'd lose a lot of myself that I haven't already lost in that process.
If we don't want Cheliax invading Osirian, I think I can pretty straightforwardly assassinate Abigail and find out whether there are others. If there are, you just send Cheliax an ultimatum before the children are ensouled. Swear not to invade Osirian for the next year, or I'll destroy you now before the children are ensouled. I do kind of want Cheliax invading Osirian as part of my interest in Asmodeus, thinking that things are going really well for him, but I acknowledge that probably if I cared more about Osirian, I wouldn't really be all right with that, and that the calculations about Asmodeus are tenuous right now.
I'm not clear I would otherwise destroy Cheliax if I was still planning on my current default plan. There's an obstacle there that I'm seeing more clearly after recent discussions, and now that my emotions are in better repair. How would you find out if there are other children?
I have spectacular bluff these days. I teleport in, assassinate Abigail, raise her, and say to her, I just saved you from Keltham destroying Igorian. Next time, consider not letting it come to that. Are there others as well?
I am not following this plan at all. She lies and says no, and then, alerted of my suspicion, orders the further children evacuated to outside of Cheliax until they are ensouled.
She is told that you're prepared to preemptively destroy Cheliax unless there are no further children. If she says no, I say, great. We bring Keltham an oath to that effect, and he won't destroy Cheliax. If she can't provide that oath, we kill the other mothers until she can... Wrong. Thought you're upset about them going to hell. If she evacuates them from the country, your incentive is still to destroy Cheliax to ensure it doesn't have the capacity to go after Osirian, unless Cheliax is prepared to commit that they won't.
So this is being done at a point where I otherwise would destroy Cheliax, namely if I switched away from my main plan and then was otherwise about to run out of time on ensoulments probably starting? I can stop Cheliax going after Osirian just by attacking Igorian with something that draws in their military response and then destroying Igorian, I think. Or are you proposing that Cheliax responds to threats, so I should make one? Or proposing that it benefits myself, rather than being a threat, if I speed up the time when I'd otherwise confront them? Carissa, the fact that all of this enormous mess happens to me at a certain time, unless I delete or clean up the multiverse before then, really looks to me like the plot is telling me to get on with it. Not that the plot is telling me to wade into this enormous mess.
If that's so, I think you should say, fuck the plot. Do this at the time when you are most prepared and estimate the highest odds of success, or don't do it at all. In any story worth reading, it'd be a mistake to do something with these stakes at a time chosen by external forces for any reason that isn't your own.
Fighting Pharasma is one thing. Fighting the plot is another. The current incentives that have been applied to me are sufficient to force me to hurry up and get on with the main plotline, taken at face value, because I do not, in fact, want to destroy Igorian as well as Absalom, or destroy all of Cheliax and send its inhabitants to hell, because possibly this world is mostly not real, and one of my putative children ends up in a sequel being mostly real. When I consider defying those incentives, there is then the further question of whether the incentives just escalate, as opposed to staying in place while I defy them, or if they'd have just been raised retroactively before the story started, if I was somebody to whom the current incentives would not be sufficient. I'm not saying flatly no. I'm saying why I'm hesitant to defy the current incentives that suggest getting this all cleared up in a couple of weeks objective.
Do you agree that our odds of success are much worse if we have to rush to be ready in a couple of weeks objective, compared to if we have all the time we need at high INT and with specialized magic items to think and design wish wordings and consult every power it might be worth consulting?
I agree that our odds of success would be much better with a 10-speed time-dilated demoplane than with a 2-speed time-dilated demoplane, which is why the laws of magic in Golarion are such as to make a 10-fold sped-up demoplane not be possible with the resources I have available. I agree that my problems would be much easier if I could consult Iomadai about all of them, and it is obvious that the story will be twisted up into any pretzel-like shape required to prevent that.
You know what? That's a prediction. Let's test it. Plan on taking 6 months. If something mysteriously happens to make this completely impossible, I will concede that it is more likely that there's some kind of plot that will make it impossible to approach this in a responsible fashion. If nothing mysteriously happens, we're not in the story you think we're in, and the story isn't set up to destroy the universe if we only achieve moderate gains. And it's reasonable for us to be doing moderate things and leaving the key problem here to the next generation. This is really important. We have a way to check if it's true.
Then I guess I have you to thank, Carissa, for Abigail's substitution plot and the fact that I have an unknown number of children looming over me to make it mysteriously impossible for me to take 6 months, as you might otherwise have been able to talk me into doing. I don't actually mean that. I would have talked me into doing that without the deadline.
You can in fact take 6 months. You taking 6 months vastly improves the possible outcomes here.
No, my being unable to take the blatant hint presented by the storyline about needing to resolve this before my children get ensouled causes the story to be even harsher about giving me a time limit. Retroactively, I'd expect, but that doesn't make a difference here.
Keltham, give me a diamond and a wording and I'll fucking blow up Cheliax today, okay? And then you can take 6 months.
Either I'm really missing something, or the today part there makes no sense. 1. I haven't currently bought any wish diamonds since I was planning to harvest them in a week. 2. If I found a diamond like that on the market, we then would not have any way to convert that wish diamond to a wish inside of Golarion. The bottleneck is forming a relationship with somebody who'll make me a wish scroll. 3. If I had an extra wish scroll, it would then be premature to use an insufficiently refined wish wording in case that blew up more than Cheliax, which risk we could reduce by thinking about it at INT 29 until the deadline had almost run out. Should we take a break? Either you really missed something or I really missed something or both. And either way, there's standard heuristics about taking a break and having a snack at this point.
You're right. Sorry. I don't need a diamond, just your acknowledging this as an allowable use of the wishes I already have. And ideally a wording, but I'll recruit Feyanar and we'll figure something out ourselves if needed. The reason I want to do it today is that it seems to me you have tied yourself up into an utterly absurd knot around how story logic says, not just that you should do this instead of doing something more limited, but also likelier to succeed, but also about how story logic says that you should do it much sooner than when is optimal for the odds of it going well, and I can't respect a story where you're supposed to rush ahead and do something you haven't thought through before you're ready. In any real story, that ends with Yog-Sothoth eating everybody. And I can't respect a person who thinks that way. And in order to have as much time as possible working with a thinking Keltham who I respect before the deadline, I think I should not wait until the last minute to blow up Cheliax. If I wait that long, you're not progressing on 6-month or 1-year challenge Pharasma plans in the interim. I think I should just get it over with and blow up Cheliax today. Even if there's a 90% chance of a failure mode where the wish actually destroys much, much more than that, that's clearly worth it to have you wait 6 months on your challenge. Pharasma plans. I believe this is in your interests, and I am planning to do it this afternoon, though I'll of course spend a couple hours thinking about it first.
I am concerned about the potential dynamic this is heading into, where you have bright ideas and want to do them, and I keep having to be the one saying no. I think you would notice as many as several issues with doing this 2 hours from now, given 2 hours to think about it. I want to send you off to think about it, but I feel it would be dishonest to claim that I would, at the end of those 2 hours, assent to that use of those wishes that I purchased from you and that you gave me in reparation, 3 of which I saved out against better advised uses than this. Wish phrasings that destroy whole countries are weirdly difficult to come by, go figure. Osirian thought they needed me for that. I don't think Hell would be much inclined to interpret any ambiguities in your favor either, if you tried using your Hell wish for that. That said, if you think you have a good enough wording based on only the Alani knowledge you have, which I had thought was carefully selected not to be dangerous in that way, Osirian does have a wish scroll. I will think about whether the agreements we've made so far are ones that I interpret to mean you couldn't try to talk Osirian into it. I'm saying this, and making that much of a suggestion for how you could try to destroy Cheliax this afternoon anyways, despite blatant flaws in your proposal as first stated by you, only because I do not want our relationship to get into a mode where I am the obstacle to all of your bright ideas. Rather than, as is actually the case, your haste and your terror and the resulting flaws in your ideas being the obstacle to your ideas. I don't own you and can't give you orders. I suggest that you go take a break, Carissa. I suggest that you think that proposal over and talk to Carmen or Fe'anar. Please convey to them that I said that you shouldn't be told about the really basic obstacle to destroying Cheliax 2 hours from now with a hastily assembled wish, because I think it is important for you to think the problems through without knowing that.
I am concerned about a potential dynamic where you want to have this all over with in 3 weeks, so even if I come up with a good idea, you will insist that the plot says you mustn't try to work around this self-imposed deadline of yours. But I acknowledge that until I in fact have a good idea, I might be assuming this of you unfairly.
I will be huddled in my bed tent if anybody needs me. Do not actually destroy Cheliax without giving me a final chance to explain why you should not, even if you should find all your own resources for it. I do consider that something that will interfere with my plans, based on information I gave you, as is prohibited by agreements we've already made.
Understood. It's not, to be clear, that I want to, that I'd do it lightly. Everyone I love lives there, and I don't want to send them to hell. But if I were a person anywhere else in the multiverse at all, I'd hope the person in my place would do whatever it took to make you spend 1 extra week double-checking your assumptions and consulting other powers about your plan.
I have not in fact killed of my own will a single person yet. That probably doesn't mean anything to you right now. It wouldn't seem important on a scale of trying to destroy Pharasma's creation. Ask the Iomeden to explain. I don't know how to say it to somebody from Cheliax, but Carmen will know how to say it maybe, or Fe'anar. He turns and goes about back to his tent, his breathing not very steady.
She goes to Carmen.
How did it go?
It worked for a little while. We talked about some things I thought we couldn't talk about, and I did the pretend Keltham thing and managed to not feel like it's incredibly dangerous to give him any information about myself. So that was progress. But then he said that he said things that came across to me as if he was saying that he wouldn't entertain any plans to stop Cheliax invading Osirion or solve the children issue because he thinks the plot is just telling him to attack Pharasma by then. And I don't have any idea what to do with that. What I was trying not to say to him is that I feel such intense contempt for anyone who would think about the world that way that I don't think I could possibly work with them. There's clearly a bunch of forces at play here, and some of them are gods, and some of them might not even be gods. But I just don't believe at all that those forces want Keltham to go ahead with his plan in a couple of weeks, unless they in fact want the multiverse destroyed, or want a pointless illustrative tragedy where Keltham tries and gets unceremoniously squished. Am I wrong? Isn't that, if you were writing a story with a character like Keltham who went ahead and did this in a couple of weeks because he thought he was a character in a story and was supposed to do it then, how would that story end?
Is this didactic fiction aimed at children in Mendev? Is it a serial published in the Absalom papers?
I think Keltham thinks it's an Alani story. Probably I should just calmly discuss this with him like I calmly discuss the merits of destroying the universe with him. It's not different. It's my job to calmly discuss with him every way he's being unfathomably monstrous. I hate him.
The story disagreement feels to you like another values disagreement, not just a factual disagreement about kinds of story?
I don't know how to put words to it. So one part of it is that I really do think a story where you rush ahead with your incredibly dangerous plan before you've properly checked if it even works and before you've explored all your alternatives, because you think you're in a story and you're supposed to rush ahead is a tragedy. It's a story where you lose. Another part of it is that I proposed an experiment. The thing Keltham was saying didn't make any sense to me, and I said, okay, let's try solving the current reason to rush, and if that fails, I will change your mind in your direction about how the story works, and if it succeeds, then you can agree that you're not in the same story you thought you were in, and your story assumptions didn't apply. And he said, then I guess I have you to thank, Carissa, for Abigail's substitution plot, and the fact that I have an unknown number of children looming over me, to make it mysteriously impossible for me to take 6 months, as you might otherwise have been able to talk me into doing. I don't actually mean that. I would have talked me into doing that without the deadline. And that's when I stopped being able to... I tried to translate that and pretend he'd said something that wasn't incredibly cruel and stupid, but I couldn't think of any possible meaning that wasn't cruel and stupid. It felt like he was saying that it was silly, that I was proposing a test, that he was so sure that no new information would possibly change his mind, that I was silly for believing him when he taught us things about checking your beliefs against reality, because actually all you're supposed to do is fold the information in to your own explanation you already have for doing what you wanted to do. It was like I didn't know who I was talking to. I thought we'd been having an Alani conversation about how new evidence would change our minds, and now he was mocking the entire idea.
Do you think he was actually doing that?
I have been trying, and I can't think what else it could possibly have been. I proposed a test, and he said that. If that wasn't, oh no, I'm just going to back-interpret previous events as a test of this hypothesis that already confirmed what I want to believe, and refuse to conduct any more tests. What was he saying?
Did you ask him?
No. It would have been a good idea, but I could feel I was getting emotional. It felt like such an impossible task. If all the Alani stuff wasn't even true, if we couldn't even test theories, if the answer to every proposed test I put to him was always going to be, reality already proved me right. And he hates it when I don't conceal my feelings well enough. I think it's not actually just that he doesn't take it into consideration. I think he sort of anti-takes it into consideration. Like, if you have feelings about him destroying the universe, not even to stop hell, but just because he thinks it's what the plot said to do next, and he thinks if he doesn't do it, the plot will give him even more incentive, then that definitely means you should be ignored. So I didn't say any of that. I just said, you taking 6 months vastly improves the possible outcomes here. I was trying so hard to be Alani.
You can ask to pause, when it seems like he's saying something horrifically immoral. Ask for both of you to cool off.
Should have done that. But instead, when I said the thing about improving the possible outcomes, he said, no. My being unable to take the blatant hint presented by the storyline about needing to resolve this before my children get ensouled causes the story to be even harsher about giving me a time limit. Retroactively, I'd expect, but that doesn't make a difference here. And it just felt so clear that he'd already made up his mind, about this thing that was insane and not true, that he was not processing it as some probability that could update. You can, be a coherent mind that cannot change its mind in response to any evidence. The math's not hard, and I could just see it. Him going ahead in a couple of weeks because it was impossible to convince him that that wasn't what the story told him to do, and then Pharasma crushing him like a bug and Rovagug eating the world, and even if his plan is a good idea, we won't succeed without throwing some serious resources and effort at making sure the version of it we're doing is a version that has any hope of success. If we've consulted with entities that understand what we're trying to do, if we've, wished up more smart people smart enough to look over the wordings and understand the physics. It just felt so clear that for this not to be hopeless, for us to have even the slightest shard of a chance of success, it couldn't be something we were rushing blindly into in a couple of weeks. There are no victories down that road. I don't know. Am I insane?
I would definitely expect much better results from a plan that we spent years working on than from a plan that we spent weeks working on. Though the countervailing factor is, of course, the element of surprise. Right now, lots of people suspect Keltham might have a crazy plan to let out Rovagug or something, but they mostly figure that even a very rich, very traumatized, very creative teenage boy who is a first circle wizard can't actually let out Rovagug, and so they're not immediately throwing unprecedented resources at stopping him. If he starts demonstrating capabilities that suggest he's not at all best modeled as a first circle wizard, then they'll react very quickly.
Oh, that'd be the problem with my first pass plan to solve this then. I was thinking about how to cut this knot, and I realized if Cheliax is destroyed, then no deadline. That's it. It's that simple. No babies, no war with Osirion, no Project Lawful trying to invent super weapons of its own. We have the 3 wishes Keltham didn't use, and Osirion has their own wish scroll. Instead of trying to argue Keltham out of something he cannot change his mind about, no Cheliax, no deadline. And Keltham, he trips himself up on all kinds of complicated questions about whether destroying Cheliax is really and truly in his own not threat-shaped best interests. But I just don't want the universe to be destroyed, and I could wish a hole in the world where everyone I love lives, and then the universe is less likely to be destroyed.
I think probably changing Keltham's mind about things is not actually literally impossible.
I was trying to do it by every rule I know about.
Yep, and still you failing does not very strongly suggest that it's impossible.
If you were Chelish, you would hurt me when you said that, for being stupid, and I think I strongly prefer that.
Too bad, kid. Look, I think convincing Keltham to take more time is a good plan. I suspect it is not actually impossible. If convincing Keltham to take more time actually requires destroying Cheliax, then yes, we should do it. But gee, you two talked for about an hour and a half.
But what if I can't convince him and then trillions of people die because I was not good enough at convincing people of true things?
It sounds like you're so scared all the time. And that's why the slightest thing going wrong talking to Keltham drives you to extreme panic. Because when you're this scared, it's hard to deal with any additional scary things happening. Because you genuinely might have to destroy your home country where you grew up. Not even to save the universe, but to save a couple more months we can spend on trying to save the universe, and that's awful.
How do you be this scared and keep going?
The Church of Iomedae is actually kind of useless on this topic because Iomedae, being a paladin even as a human, could not feel fear. And most of her followers are paladins and also can't feel fear. I've mostly been just, imagining if we have to explain ourselves later to Iomedae, to our grandchildren, what extremely reasonable questions will they have?
Probably Keltham's going to tell me I am not allowed to get paladined for the fear immunity because that's just as stupid as the plan to blow up all of Cheliax today just to be on the safe side. But I am suddenly tempted to atone lawful good and pay Abadar to paladin me.
Prayer is disallowed on base, yeah. I wonder if a useful habit for you, talking to Keltham, would be saying clever, tempting solution that probably doesn't work, before presenting your strikingly clever ideas you come up with on the fly, which are quite good, as ideas you come up with on the fly, but still usually don't work, as is predictable for ideas you come up with on the fly, so then you and he don't get drawn into debating blowing up Cheliax.
He actually handled that very reasonably, just suggested we take a break and said he didn't want to be in a role of shooting down every idea I had. I just wish he'd been acting like that about my ideas to test if we're in a story that wants us to rush ahead while manifestly unready.
If he had been, what would he have said?
I genuinely feel terrified at the idea of testing what happens if we ignore the children-based incentive to move quickly. This is already a situation where one of my deepest, oldest, and most important values, my own personal children, not being born into a nightmare universe where they may end up eternally tortured in hell, has mysteriously turned out to be at stake. I find it terrifying to imagine what might show up next if I prove unable to be moved by those stakes. The experiment would totally give us valuable information, but it might well give it to us in a format so horrible I don't want to contemplate it. Like now Carissa is in hell and being tortured to insanity by Asmodeus personally, and I have to act while there's something left.
Worth it, though, if it improves our odds.
I think in some important respects you're a very admirable person, Carissa, But if that were to happen, the odds of this going well are just worse.
Because of Keltham's own personal shortcomings. That's not fair, but I wanted to say it anyway to make myself feel better.
Carmine Sandre, Lintamand. Every person I've ever met has fracture points, Carissa, at which they can't keep moving forwards no matter how much they calculate that they ought to.
I don't. Also, not fair. Also, just said it to make myself feel better. But if Keltham's too scared to experiment on the story thing, and I in fact think this definitely won't go well if we rush it, what do I do?
I don't know. But putting the question to him when you've both had some time to cool down seems worthwhile. And if you don't get anywhere, then we'll talk about what we can do instead, which might include stabbing Abigail Throon, probably doesn't include blowing up her country, and doesn't tip our hand about Keltham being much more than a first circle wizard.
Why don't you just talk to Keltham? You'd be better at it.
We've talked some. I think I'm missing a lot of context that is helpful for arguing with Keltham about anything complicated. And I'm not fundamentally a person who explodes the world, even if I've encountered an impeccable argument for doing so, which makes it hard to entertain arguments for doing so.
There was something else Keltham wanted you to explain to me. He said, I've never killed anyone. I fundamentally don't understand what he was trying to get at, beyond, I have feelings about losing my virginity, which I realize that's really uncharitable.
He's going to take psychological damage from doing something like blowing up Cheliax and sending everyone there to hell, if it does end up necessary, so it's a cost to his functioning as well as a benefit, and he doesn't have any idea the magnitude of the cost, but thinks it might be large?
Maybe, I guess. That means I should not suggest my other bright idea, which is that he go to Axis, kidnap someone there, and feed them to a demon, so he understands a trillionth of what he plans to do.
I don't think you should suggest that idea. Would you even want him to take you up on it?
Yeah? I think it'd reduce the odds he destroys the universe by more than 1 in a trillion.
It's okay for humans who aren't gods, and who don't have godlike abilities for what they do not to change who they are, as well as not having godlike abilities to assess situations, to be unwilling to do awful, awful things that math suggests are justified. It is usually correct.
I don't see why I should be held to a lower standard than Iomade. It's fair to say I'm actually worse than her, and so shouldn't do what she'd do because of my own actual failures. But I don't think the bar should be any different.
Well, that's not a reaction I've ever gotten before to the why you might not want to follow the math that says you should do something appalling talk. If you want to, you can try to be exactly like Iomade, but Iomade also wouldn't go kidnap people from Axis to feed to demons because she wouldn't learn anything from doing so. And I think Keltham probably aspires to also be the kind of person who wouldn't learn anything from doing so.
And he might well be the kind of person who wouldn't learn anything from doing so, but I don't think he can be 99.999% sure he wouldn't.
And yet I'm pretty sure Iomade, if she could show Keltham something, would definitely not show him that.
Yeah, okay. Do you just not personally want to hurt me, or do you actively recommend against my getting hurt for some reason?
I think we don't have a ton of time, and you aren't going to be using it very well if you try to get tortured every time you handle something badly. And I think that part of being an adult is to screw up and know you screwed up and have nowhere to look for forgiveness or for punishment and keep going because there is very nearly as much to fight for as there was yesterday.
You know, I'm kind of starting to think Iomade got a raw deal in Chelish propaganda.
I'm sure her church can just write Abigail Throon and get that straightened out in the next edition.
Carissa turns herself into a bird and flies around in case Nirvana's onto something, and that helps you have more universal human compassion, writes a list of arguments for delay and strategies for delay, which she will make if Keltham seems like he's in fact possible to persuade about that, and then soothes herself with Abigail assassination plans until Keltham comes out of his tent.
He comes out, looking great.
Hey, you are right that probably it does not advance our goals to just blow up Cheliax, and I appreciate you not responding to that by telling me I was too much of a child to be here and letting me figure it out myself. I know that it is really hard for you to work around the ways I am unpredictable to you.
Well, don't expect any forgiveness for it. Both of us are under too little stress and have had too much time to relax already. Cutting each other any slack would only make things worse.
She stands there blinking at him for solidly several seconds.
He's joking, and he made it really, really blatant so you couldn't possibly miss it.
Yeah, okay. I have some ideas related to buying more time, but I think there's some confusion I need to resolve first about why it feels like my ideas for delay are not landing or are threatening to hear.
Sorry, I worked that out, once I had time to stop and look back. It's because I want so much for all of this to be over and done, and I'm glad that the story gave me a time limit, because it means there's only so long I have to hold myself together.
Oh, well, maybe you want to see Carmen about that or something, if it's not the kind of thing that stops being true once you notice it.
Carmen is not able to help me on issues like that, nor Feyanar, nor she who calls herself minor character, nor Sarcini, nor Ione Sala when I see her. Help me think about plans, yes, about other people, yes, internal issues, no. If I cannot solve them myself, they are not solvable by their advice. I will at least decide consciously how much risk I want to take of unnecessarily destroying the multiverse in exchange for doing this faster, including as a selfish bargain within myself, rather than making that decision unthinkingly. I realize this is a mode of thinking you're uncomfortable with, but given that the story is forcing you to work by persuading me, anything genuinely important that you need to persuade me about is something I can probably be persuaded of. It is not the slightest bit uncommon for the big villain of a Dath Ilani story to get talked out of it. There just has to be some clear reason the villain didn't think of the argument himself. And tropes aside, it is very hard to get a Dath Ilani to just shut you out and stop listening by making one mistake at him, when we already have an established relationship like this one. That element of the story may come with time limits for you to think of the right argument, but it won't be sudden death. Exactly what he said, except replace Dath Ilani with me, Keltham.
I think that if you find yourself wanting to let your selfish priorities rule at substantial expense to plan success, that would be completely fine and understandable. And in that case, we should give the 1,000,000 diamonds to the Church of Iomedae and go hide somewhere until it's all over. If you are going to be selfish enough to not do any of this to yourself. Don't be just unselfish enough to decide you owe it to the universe to try, and not unselfish enough to give it the kind of try that can actually succeed.
Sadly, these kinds of internal emotional arrangements often lack the kind of clear-cut structure that would make that a crushingly valid argument, and not every optimal strategy is at an extreme of the action space, though they usually are. Congratulations anyways on making the sort of argument to a Dath Ilani that even Ione Sala would not have known how to make. To check, because it's something that I'm nervous about, what did you understand about why not to destroy Cheliax immediately?
Lots of people have probably had the thought you might want to destroy the world, but they know you're a first circle wizard with a little bit of alchemy, and so they're not very scared of you. Once you do something big, they'll recalculate, and that probably reduces how much time we have. You already threatened to destroy Cheliax, and Abigail might have believed you, but other powers in Galarian didn't, and the gods don't know you're capable of it. We don't want them to know until it's too late. They might do what Ottomans did about Nidal and just steal all the diamonds, or change physical law, or squish you or something. Also, we're almost definitely underground in the Ostenso non-intervention zone, and I might hit us by accident.
Yes, that was the overriding reason not to do it in 2 hours. Lurilata sent me a message swearing that Ottomans wanted me back in the non-intervention zone, and demanded that I go there in Ottoman's name, guaranteeing my safe conduct in Ostenso if I did, and that Cheliax would not act on Lurilitha-derived knowledge about where I was. I negotiated some on what I could get in exchange from Ottomans and Asmodeus. Everybody here shares my diplomatic immunity if they want to visit Ostenso, and Ottomans has up some kind of further non-interference field around this mini-vault. I still keep up Mind Blank at all times, and so should you per agreement. Did the Iomedan or Feyanar manage to explain to you why it mattered that I still hadn't killed anyone?
She thought that it'd affect you quite a lot, and you didn't have any way of knowing how much, and so I shouldn't think that we'd get more functional Keltham time out of killing people, especially not out of something like killing everyone in Cheliax and sending them all to hell.
That's not exactly it. You know, on second thought, I should not have hoped Carmen could explain that. I forgot how much nobody from Golarion can explain anything to anybody, even when they do know. It's that, when Cheliax is destroyed, that's throwing away all hope that Golarion is, glad to have known me, in an unmixed way. Even with Cheliax taught to refine more spell silver, there's still a chance that it'll end up okay, if the game board can be changed to make it winnable for good. I could think of something when I'm much, much smarter, and not need to release Rovagug or destroy Absalom at all. It's the saying out of Dathilan goes, Don't be swift to throw away your deontology. Don't rush to break the light, shatter the alignment of all the different ways that something can be good, all lined up on the same side. They can't always be aligned, but while they can be, you keep them together. You don't always wait until literally the last minute to kill. You don't wait literally as long as possible if that comes at a huge cost in failure. You don't take any other plan no matter how terrible. But wiping out Cheliax early, so that, you think, my mind will be more focused on long-term planning, that is not reason enough. You can't be that eager. You don't go looking for plans that make you do something like that, and then go, oh well, that's what the expected utility numbers say. Better go do that then. Yourself, who erased her memories, might have understood that when she sent you to buy back the souls of the Project Lawful researchers, especially if she knew that Peranza or Asmodia needed rescuing, or she understood how her Keltam would have thought about it at least. You keep the last threads of the light alive for as long as you can. That would be true even if we weren't in a story.
I don't have a hard time imagining believing that. I have a hard time imagining believing that and also thinking that unusually unpretty bits of greater reality should be scrubbed out of the face of the universe. I can't imagine any planet that, knowing everything, would hope to have you land on it. I understand preserving, the state where that's not true, in the same way as wanting the people who worked for you, Peranza and Asmodia, to be better off for it. But once you've thrown that out anyway...
I won't throw it away until the very end.
I am not actually sure that makes any sense as a decision procedure, but I appreciate you explaining it. I have, in fact, already killed people and will do so again if it seems like the best thing for me to do.
The negative utilitarian is usually the honorable one. Never wanted to hurt anyone at all. That's what makes them such tragic villains. Not really how I thought of myself before I came to Golarion, but there you go. I continue to think that you did not understand at all the point about why you go, let's die in a fire together, to conditional Zone Kuthon, who will build Zovaikane unless you pay him 5 gold pieces. It's not about that part of reality being unpretty. It's about that counterfactual branch being one that you didn't want to end up in, so you don't give agents retroactive incentives to create it. There's an entire philosophy of decision theory, which says that the very act of making a decision is annihilating all the branches of logical possibility where you made different decisions, and that the principle of rational choice is to choose so as to unmake all realities except the one where you get the best outcome. Maybe let's just pick that up again at INT 29.
Sounds good. Right now, I feel threatened by decision theories put forwards by people who don't share many of my values. I feel suspicious that tucked into the justification somewhere is an assumption that I find horrifying. Probably when I feel competent to derive most of it myself, I won't feel that way about it anymore.
If it's not the same decision theory used by all the gods, they screwed up, or we screwed up, or Dathilon didn't teach me real decision theory because it was too dangerous.
Yeah, any of those seem kind of plausible.
I wouldn't say it's that plausible that Dathilon screwed up. I still don't think you properly grasp a difference of scale between civilization and me. Never mind. Do you have anything promising for plans to allow us more time to work, especially if there's resources we need to gather now, or decisions we need to make soon, rather than at INT 29?
So, 1, I think that you should be willing to wait until the point where Cheliax tells you that there's a child in Suld. You don't have to preempt that. You intend to either destroy the world or fix it. If you destroy it, there's no reason to think that the child will wake up somewhere else, since there's no thing that you care about there. Just because there's a soul, there's no mind with continuity of memory. That buys a week or two. And 2, well, I may in fact have a bias towards plans that involve assassinating Abigail for personal reasons, but I think that Cheliax without a queen, or, with me as queen, if we see a way to swing that, would also not invade Osirion immediately.
I must say, that went rather well, all things considered. Apparently we put Keltam over some critical threshold of being slightly less traumatized, where he doesn't just accept the wishes from Carissa as reparation, because that's the utilitarian thing to do. And Carissa figures out his real plan before handing over the wishes, but does so anyways, which utterly changes the dynamic between him and Carissa, which causes the resulting conversation to be absolutely nothing like any possibility that Nethys showed us. And Carissa even seems to be talking Keltham into waiting past his calculated installment time, which completely throws off all of our schedules for everything according to what we previously thought was the plot.
Ah! Screamed the god.
Caden Kylian, I genuinely modelled you as having more tolerance for spontaneity than this. You literally became a god on a drunken dare.
And as I've tried to explain many times to my followers, often in Elysium, when I managed to pull myself together as a god afterwards, my very first thought with my vastly increased intellect was that going for the Starstone while drunk had been an absolutely terrible idea. Even if it had happened to work that one time. The concept of doing stupid things while drunk does not prohibit the concept of regretting them afterwards. A lot more people are going to die if we don't know how to time evacuations, but we can't exactly ask Keltham to set a hard date and deadline, while we are carefully not encouraging him in any way whatsoever to do any of this. They're still on a time limit and still going to make mistakes, but now neither they nor we know exactly what their time limit is. And even that desideratum completely pales next to what happens if we've fucked up the main story logic on any number of possible levels, or if this is happening because Nethys lied to us about the real goal of his walkthrough.
Indeed. So now it's time to shift to improvising everything that remains to be done. Flexible schedules for all the new plans. Cheer up, Caden Kylian. If nothing else, this gives Pilar Pineda more time in which to eat you.
It's not like that between us. Seriously, it's not.
And yet it's still a beautiful young thing who ends up consuming that much of you somehow.
Carissa spends the next several subjective days building a wall of sorts so she can keep all the considerations in her head at the same time. Here's how we might try to take Avernus. Here's how we might try to use my compact and other forces in hell to side with us in taking down Asmodeus. Here's how we might finagle the release of Rovagug so there's a chance of survivors. Here's how things might turn out if we go home and leave this to Iomade. To her enormous irritation, there's a strong argument for the Threaten Pharasma plan. It's not one anyone thought of, possibly because it doesn't matter to anyone but her. In any plan for a war with Hell or in Hell, billions of the current inhabitants of Hell will die. Keltham thinks this is good, since they want to die. Carissa grudgingly acknowledges that they get to consider that an improvement over their current situation, if that's how they feel about it, but it's still an almost maximally bad outcome for them. The man she interrogated about rumors in Agorian hoped for Abaddon, and he wasn't wrong to hope for Abaddon, perhaps, but that doesn't mean she'd have been doing right by him by giving him Abaddon. She'd have been doing right by him by giving him other options he in fact preferred to Abaddon. If they get Pharasma to give them hell, they can make things better for the entities in it, instead of giving up on them. If they do anything else, probably several layers of hell get destroyed. Devils don't particularly want to live. She can see why now. It has to do with Aspexia's favorite concept, corrigibility. Something that really, really wants to be alive is a notably worse slave than something without any such strong wants. Obviously, a great horror was done when they took the shattered, formless soul of someone like Carissa and shaved away the part where she wants to live. But she doesn't think all the horror was done there. Some of it has not yet been done and will be done when they, in fact, kill that person using the fact they no longer want to live very much as justification. If they do the Pharasma plan she puts on her wall, they should arrange to be able to fix the devils and the paving stones. It is worth some risk. Not, in Carissa's calculation, very much risk, but some risk of losing everything, for the chance of saving those souls too. She doesn't talk to Keltham about Caden Kylian and Nethys, but her guesses about what they want make it onto the wall too. They encouraged her cult on purpose. Why? How does ascension even work? Does it matter if she has a cult? Should she be encouraging her cult? Would Pharasma care who all the lawful evil humans think should be the lawful evil god? Can Pharasma even see that? Why would chaotic good want a chaotic good god eaten by a lawful evil one? What are they getting in exchange for that? Or is it more that only in that manner can any compromise at all exist between Hell's Keltham will permit to exist and Hell's that Asmodeus will? What is Asmodeus at his core? What are the most essential features? He's not actually the god of torture. Are there hells without torture he'd abide? What is the minimum guarantee from Pharasma they'd need to be confident they'll get to keep building civilization? Can Abadar be trusted to look out for that? If he's handed a specification, How could Abadar not know something important to his domain he's been trying to understand for a long time? What kind of limitation is that anyway? Is it fundamental? If it's unknowable to him, presumably he wouldn't be trying to learn it, right? How important is Golarion in the multiverse? How much do they lose if it's lost? Are there alternatives to destroying it? Are there alternative distractions that'd let an ascending god slip through? Zon Kuthon's in a vault, right? Can Iomade be persuaded to let him out? Is that even worse than Rovagug? What would hell be like if it wasn't stupid? Forget what both alien entities hostile to human values, Keltham and Asmodeus, want here. What would hell be like if it was a place for lawful evil as it abides in human hearts? What would the place Melol should go be if it wasn't hell? If he'd turned down Nirvana, not wanting to be smoothed away into something good? It is actually only the second most complicated wall she's dealt with recently, but for the first one she had Asmodea and Corva. They're thinking that resurrecting Asmodea, even if hell let it go through, would be a giveaway about who Carissa works for now. Carissa is less sure that going to the gardens is impossible, especially since they still should talk to Ericura about anything related to Pharasma negotiations. Most importantly, Ericura stole divinity from Pharasma, and Pharasma doesn't seem notably weakened by it. Is she a different kind of thing than everyone else? If so, what about Rovagug made him a danger to her? Was it something about prophecy not working around Rovagug? Can they get them some of that?
He spends most of the time alone, wearing the plush Six Splendor headband and using no other enhancements, even as spells. If the nice comforting deadline has been removed on how long he needs to hold himself together with solder and duct tape, then he needs to recover and put himself together now that he's in time dilation. Is his will failing here? Possibly. Being able to keep up a storm of work for 3 months on Project Lawful when everything is going great and you are having fun, and in a lot of supportive relationships, and your problems are fundamentally way easier, is not the same as being able to work continuously under his current conditions. Even with a +6 belt of mighty constitution, he will, if he gets a look at Carissa's wall or checks in with her on what she's thinking about, remind her that she cannot plan to threaten Pharasma by proxy. If she expects him to threaten Pharasma successfully and prefers that outcome, she cannot help him with that in any way. Carissa can try to reduce associated harm to herself and Pharasma, maybe, if her method doesn't hinder his plans, but she can't plan to threaten Pharasma. That is the whole reason why Good couldn't do this earlier. The fact that she came up with her plan to delay Cheliax's invasion and give him more time to work, while still in utter horror at his plans generally, is helpful. That shows Carissa wasn't threatening Pharasma by proxy in trying to give him more time to work. But if she started thinking there's a case for being less than utterly horrified with all this, that is going to require him to be much more careful in considering Carissa's further suggestions to make sure that they benefit Pharasma as well as himself.
Yes. I promise I still want you to stop all this and go home. But when I'm working on alternatives, I need a calculation of exactly how bad your plan is. So I only present you with alternatives I genuinely think work out better by my values and expectation.
The old saying, why trust what you can verify out of Dathilan, seems to apply with some small degree of additional force, when one wrong thought, not even inside his own mind, potentially destroys the multiverse when it could otherwise be saved. So he is, in fact, going to be doing some extra checking and reminding here.
She does not actually mind. Keltham trying to make sure they don't accidentally blow up the world is the most sympathetic remaining thing about him. That and his smile when he succeeds at casting a complicated spell.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059.